Hello and welcome to the Anatomy Structure Identification series. In this section we are going to look at many structures of the digestive system. This is one of the models that we use in the lab that shows many of those structures. Food enters the mouth, which is also called the oral cavity, and is broken up by the chewing action of the teeth. This is the mouth, oral cavity, teeth. The tongue, right here is the tongue, is a very powerful muscle that manipulates the food as we chew. Here is the uvula. And the uvula is a structure that extends from the soft palate, and it elevates when we swallow, thus preventing food from going back up into the nasal passages. The food travels past the throat. Remember, the name for throat is pharynx, and this region of the pharynx, because it's near the oral cavity, is the oropharynx. It travels past the oropharynx and then past the laryngopharynx. And then down the esophagus. When we swallow, the epiglottis, a structure of the respiratory system, closes off the larynx so that food doesn't go down our breathing tubes. The food continues down the esophagus, and it does not travel by gravity but by peristaltic motion down the esophagus to where it's going to enter the stomach. Now, there is a sphincter. I'm going to open the stomach to show you the sphincter right here. This is the esophageal sphincter, and sometimes it's called the cardiac sphincter because it's near the heart. The esophageal sphincter opens, allowing food to go into the stomach, and then closes when food is in the stomach so the food doesn't go back up the esophagus. A sphincter is a circular muscle that closes an orifice. If the esophageal sphincter is not working properly, acidic contents from the stomach can move into the esophagus and begin to digest the esophagus. The pain resulting from this is called heartburn. The stomach has a very mucus layer protecting it from the acid, but the esophagus lacks this mucus layer. This is the stomach. The stomach has several regions. The uppermost region, and the stomach doesn't want to stay together, is the fundus. This is the fundus, is the uppermost region. The main region is the body, and this other region here is called the pylorus. The pylorus. We also notice that there are curvatures. The inside curvature is smaller, and it is called the lesser curvature. The outside curvature is larger, and it's called the greater curvature. I'm going to open the stomach up again and identify the structures again. Fundus, body, pylorus. The pylorus has a sphincter right here. It is called the pyloric sphincter, and it regulates the emptying of contents from the stomach into the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. Duodenum. The duodenum is about 12 centimeters long, and duodenum means 12. It receives secretions from the liver, and we can see the duct here, from the liver and from the pancreas, which help digest food. Again, the first portion of the intestine, small intestine, is the duodenum, and all three food groups can be digested here. The food moves from the duodenum into the next region, and in this model we usually identify it here in the center, and it is the jejunum. That's a French word, jejunum. And it's this middle region of the small intestine. And if we could uncoil this, we would be able to see the demarcation line between the different regions of the small intestine, but since we can't, we identify jejunum here, and then it continues on and becomes the latter portion of the small intestine called the ileum. So the small intestine has three regions: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The ileum empties into the first portion of the large intestine, called the cecum. There is a valve there. It is a one-way valve, so that material from the large intestine cannot move back into the small intestine. Serious problems occur if that happens. So this valve is very important, and it gets its name from the two structures that it separates. It is the ileocecal valve. The ileocecal valve. Again, this first portion of the large intestines is called the cecum, and it's a pouch-like structure. Extending off of it is a little structure that's about the size of your pinky finger, and it is called the appendix. And in here is fecal material, and also in the appendix. So if the appendix ruptures and that material gets into the abdominal cavity, severe infection and perhaps even death can occur. So that's why we hear about the appendix a lot, because it does have that possibility. We do not know the function of the appendix. Again, the first region of the large intestine is the cecum, and then it moves upward as the ascending colon. The ascending colon. The ascending colon then turns at the right flexure, and it becomes the transverse colon. Transverse colon going across. Then the large intestine bends again at the left flexure, and we now have the descending. Note that the large intestine ascending goes up, transverse goes across, and descending goes down. So their names give you clues as to where their directions lie. Not visible here, but going back a little ways, the last portion of the colon makes an S shape. So it's called the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid colon. Then the sigmoid colon empties into the rectum. And the rectum is a pouch that holds feces until it can be expelled out the anus. Those are the main digestive structures. There are a couple of accessory organs that we also need to identify because they assist the digestive system. The first is the liver. The liver is the largest gland in the body, the liver. It produces a substance called bile. The bile is stored in this little green structure, and it really is green in the body, called the gallbladder. This is the gallbladder. And it holds the bile until, when you eat a meal with fatty substances, the message tells the gallbladder, there's a chemical message released that says, hey, there's fat in here, release the bile. Bile is released into the duodenum, and this bile emulsifies fats, breaking them into small enough parts to be absorbed by the body. So the liver produces the bile, the gallbladder stores the bile, and then releases it into the duodenum. The other accessory structure is the pancreas, and the pancreas is also a gland. It is an endocrine and an exocrine gland. We're going to look at the exocrine function in that we can see the tubing here. The product is made, travels through the tubing, and the product, which is bicarbonate, is released into the duodenum. Bicarbonate neutralizes acid, so that when the acid contents of the stomach go into the duodenum, bicarbonate is released and neutralizes the acid so you don't digest your duodenum. So we have the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas are accessory structures of the digestive system. There's another organ shown on here that I will identify, although it is not a digestive structure. It's part of the immune system, and this is the spleen. And the spleen has a number of functions, but one of the most important is that it helps make red blood cells and it cleanses red blood cells, and it destroys old red blood cells. So it has a very large blood supply, but this is the spleen. Not part of the digestive system, but since we see it on this model, I wanted to identify it. The last accessory structure can just barely be seen on this model, and that is one of the salivary glands. In the lab, the models that we have, the big torso models, have a little gland on the cheek area. And glandular structures look kind of flocculent, and the salivary glands secrete enzymes which begin the digestion process in the mouth. So the three accessory structures are salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, which is part of liver, and pancreas. This concludes the identification structure series for the digestive system.